Hello, welcome to the third episode in my book review series. The book that we're going to be talking about today is called Over the Edge of the World, and the subtitle is Magellan's Terrific Circumnavigation of the Globe. The author is Laurence Bergreen, and it was published in 2004, I believe that says. I'll just give one review. The gripping story of a 60,000-mile ocean voyage, by turns sorrowful, violent, and promiscuous, by the Los Angeles Times. This really is a great book. It goes into, here's the cover by the way, it goes into the history of Magellan's first original circumnavigation of the globe. So he starts with 5 ships, I believe it is, and he eventually only ends up with one back in port, Victoria, and it only has about 15-20 sailors left on it out of several hundred men that originally came with him. And I think just for that reason, and the fact that he didn't survive, that he died in the Philippines, it makes for one of the most intriguing historical shipping stories in history of the world, really. It was an enormous undertaking that he did. First of all, he was Portuguese, and he worked for the Spanish, so that was one of the biggest hurdles to jump over, because the Portuguese and the Spanish were in a big rivalry then. So that Charles V, who was the King of Spain at the time and later became Holy Roman Emperor, that he even trusted Magellan to lead this voyage was amazing in and of itself. But just the fact that he made it so far, I mean, the people knew that the world was round, right? That was known since ancient Greek times. What wasn't known was the actual circumference of the globe, how big it was. And a lot of people say that Magellan wouldn't have even undertaken this voyage if he had known how big the world actually was, because the Pacific Ocean is huge. And what's funny is that he calls it Pacific, meaning, pacify, peaceful, because he just got past the Cape Horn, and Cape Horn is one of the worst places on the sea for sailing vessels even today because of its huge waves. So when he got to the Pacific, because it was calm, he called it the Sea of Peace or whatever. And we all know, of course, that the Pacific is probably one of the most dangerous bodies of water on the planet. Probably the most dangerous, because it's just so huge and people can get swallowed up in it. I believe there's a Point Nemo, where if you're there, you're closer to the astronauts in space on the International Space Station than you actually are to a landmass, which is just crazy to me. Okay, so we'll go through the summary of what actually happened. I know a lot about it before, but this book really just goes through it, and it gave me a lot of knowledge about what happened. So it's mainly narrated through a man named Antonio Pigafetta. He's, I believe he's from either Genoa or... No, he's from Venice. Yeah, he's from Venice. He's Venetian. And he is one of the original 18 or 20 survivors that made it from Victoria to San Lucar on their return voyage. And he published his event, and it spread like wildfire throughout Europe. So he's our best source, but he is very Magellan serving. He kind of idolized the guy a little bit. So the author does his best to analyze the existing sources of what we have, like the interviews with the other sailors and everything, just so that we get the best, most unbiased version of events. But really, Pigafetta is mainly what he draws from. So I will go through here a little bit. The year is 1519 that he sets out on this voyage. 200, that's right, I was right earlier. About 200 men aboard 5 ships. Victoria is the smallest, actually. It's like a little tiny craft. But the others are mostly very good, the pride of the Spanish Navy. But the main, about 50 pages of the book is dedicated to, first of all, Magellan's early life. He's born into a minor noble family in Portugal. But he attempts to convince King Manuel of Portugal to let him lead a trade expedition for many, many years. He's very loyal to the man. He is, of course, he seeks glory and stuff for himself, but he also seeks glory for Portugal. However, he's kind of seen as like this beaten guy. He's not really trusted. Manuel doesn't like him very much. So eventually, because even though he's done so much for Portugal and everything, he's been on loads of expeditions, he feels betrayed by Manuel, so he takes his information and his knowledge over to Spain, and King Charles obviously distrusts him because he's Portuguese, and they're having a big rivalry at the moment over the control of the Spice Islands, the Moluccas. But what he does is Charles wants to become Holy Roman Emperor. He's only recently inherited the throne of Spain. He's a very young guy. He's about my age, actually. And he needs money to bribe the electors of the Holy Roman Empire, a couple prince bishops, dukes, maybe a couple just princes. So he needs bribe money, basically. And the way that he's going to get that bribe money is by selling spices. Now, the spices like cloves and saffron and all that was worth more than gold at the time. I mean, you can get it at a local grocery store today, but it really was worth more than gold. If they mentioned several times that if a sailor could fill a sack of these spices, he could live basically in retirement for a very rich man. Like, it was worth more than gold. So what he does is he contracts Magellan. He gives Magellan the title of Captain General. He gives him full authority over 200 men and 5 ships, and he's basically the uncontested, like, leading admiral of the fleet. But he places a restriction on how many Portuguese captains Magellan can place on the ships. Now, these Portuguese people are the people that Magellan trusts, that are loyal to Magellan, because they're countrymen, right? But the Spanish people are trusted by the king and by his regent, so it's mostly required that it be Spanish people, which on paper makes sense because it's a Spanish fleet, right? But because Magellan is Portuguese and these other people are Spanish and they don't really trust him very much, it's going to lead to a lot of resentment and eventually a mutiny in Argentina, or what is modern-day Argentina. So they set out from Sanlúcar, which is their little town, which is like a little town close to Seville, I believe. So they sail. Let me find the name of Magellan's flagship. I believe his flagship is called Santiago. Yeah, his flagship is called Santiago. Wait a minute. I don't believe that's right. San Antonio. There you go. Yes. No. I'm sorry. I just completely screwed up. His flagship is called Trinidad. My bad. I had to go over it all. So they leave Sanlúcar. Magellan is personally in command of Trinidad, and they sail to catch the easterlies, the trade winds, because you can't go basically and do that and then expect to, you can't go down. The sea has lanes, right? It just like car lanes, and planes go on routes. They can't just fly somewhere in a straight line and then expect to get wherever they go. So they catch those winds, they sail down by Africa, and then eventually around the Gold Coast they detach, and they catch the winds down to a bay in Argentina. And Magellan he's very loyal to the King of Spain, to his respect, but he's a very domineering guy. He takes advice, but he's not the type of person to very often listen to his subordinates. And the Spanish people, who believe that they're better than him because of better birth, or they believe they have more competence or whatever, they don't like that very much. So they eventually lead a mutiny. And so 3 out of 5 ships rebel against him. He's got Trinidad. Magellan has Trinidad and one other ship, ruled by his brother-in-law, I think. And so Magellan uses Trinidad as a springboard. He takes one ship, and then that ship takes another one, and eventually there's only one ship left. That one leaves, and they go back. But his expedition is really mostly intact, and he goes from having his back against the wall to being the leader again. He drops off a couple men. He drops off a priest, and he drops off the leader of the mutiny. He basically maroons them in Argentina, which is basically a death sentence. And it goes, well, they're never seen again, obviously, but they have kind of bad relationships with the natives. Magellan he wants to be a kind guy, he wants to be a good guy, but it doesn't very often go out well because obviously he believes his culture is better and he believes he needs to convert everybody to Catholicism and all that. So while they're having good trade relations, he's also saying, can I plant a cross? Can I declare my God superior over your gods or whatever? So it's always leading to tension. So eventually those people are probably killed. So they sail the remaining ships south. And while they're sailing, another one of their ships is broken up along the shoals. But thankfully, all the crew survives. None of the crew die from that sinking, and they're just relocated to other ships, mostly Victoria, I think. So, with 3 ships left, Magellan and his men enter, with Trinidad still leading, they enter the strait there. And eventually, they come upon the natives of these islands, and they're a rowboat people. They live all the time on their boats. They don't have a very good practice of like farming and stuff, but they're really admired by Magellan and his men. They like these guys a lot. So what they do is they give them gifts and everything, and in return they help Magellan and his men go into the Pacific. But Cape Horn and all that is really, really treacherous, and eventually they nearly sink. But there's something that comes up several times. It's called St. Elmo's Fire. And St. Elmo's Fire obviously they named it after a saint because they were kind of superstitious and everything, but eventually it's basically a phenomenon where I guess the masts light up or something. I don't really know. And they do discover the Magellanic Clouds, which are other galaxies or whatever. They didn't know that at the time, but it is other galaxies. So they go through and they eventually make it to the Pacific Ocean, where they declare it the Pacific, and they break off from South America. They go into these islands, and they're sailing for such a long time, and a bunch of people die out. I mean dozens, probably, yeah, many people. They have 3 ships left, I think, but maybe one is scuttled. And they make it to the Philippines, right? Magellan is not a very good leader. He's kind of full of himself a little bit. He fights these local tribal rulers for dominance, and then he puts another tribal ruler in their place who converts to Christianity. He's really good at befriending some natives, but he's really bad at playing the natives against each other, and it eventually does backfire. So one of these local native chiefs asked Magellan to help him fight another guy, and that does not turn out well because Magellan, he's saying, no, I don't want you to help me, I want to show the power of my God and everything, and they get kirked, they get killed. So the leader, they cycle through several captain generals because nobody was as magnetic as Magellan to lead the crew after that, and they eventually decide to hasta la vista to the Philippines, and they kind of make it to the Spice Islands. They fill up their ships, and a funny fact is that all the cloves and stuff aboard Victoria were enough for the expedition to break even and even make a little profit. The entire thing, just that little hold from Victoria, was enough to make the whole thing profitable. So you can imagine what it would have done if all 5 had cloves and everything. It would have made Spain rich for hundreds of years. So anyway, what they do is they leave the Philippines behind after Magellan dies. He was really the only person keeping it together. And they move on to the Arabic-speaking world, where they see the civilization that they're more used to. They see the wooden houses. They can kind of speak to the people, and they're given gifts and stuff, but they're really freaked out. Several sailors are arrested and executed, so they want to hightail it home, right? But on the way, their the two remaining ships. There's Victoria and there's Trinidad, but Trinidad is kind of disabled because they didn't repair it well enough. So the Captain General stays behind with the vast majority of the men and the vast majority of the clothes. And they send Victoria, which is still a healthy ship, ahead. And Victoria does survive. It rounds Africa with a lot of dead. And I think only 18 people from Victoria actually do limp into St. Lucar and survive that main thing. But basically what happens when they go behind is that Trinidad stays and they're repairing and everything, but the Portuguese arrive and they enslave and they kill the vast majority of the people aboard that ship. They scuttle Trinidad, they take her clothes and everything. And I believe only about 5 people from Trinidad do make it home, which is a really sad thing because the new Captain General, kind of just limply gave up. He's kind of a loser. He actually sent a letter to the Portuguese asking for help, like that would actually help them because the Portuguese and them were mortal enemies. Anyway, that part just made me really mad. So the Voyage returns home. They're obviously very humbled. Magellan is Juan Sebastian Elcano, who is commanding Victoria at the time, is a hero. He's made a hero. He's Basque, actually. And he's given a coat of arms, a knighthood, I believe. And what's really cool is that his coat of arms says, it's a globe, right? And it's got a ship, and it says, "You were the first to circumnavigate me." And I just think that's really cool. If I could have a coat of arms, I would want something really cool like that. Anyway, so that's Magellan's voyage. He does a great job at talking about all this stuff. He's got like 1,000 sources back here, and he gives a timeline. This is a viewer Q&A of all the different stuff that he talks about. So, yeah, lots of source pages. Pigafetta is, again, the main source here, but there's also a couple others that he took from obscure sailor interviews, and I think that's really, really great. This book, this book I'd give a 10 out of 10. This is one of the most interesting voyages that I've ever heard of. I loved reading this book. I could not put it down. I'm really interested to see what this author has in store next. I think they're probably my second or third favorite author now, behind Nathaniel Philbrick, who wrote In the Heart of the Sea and the USXX, which both of those we're going to get to because I love both of those books. So, yeah, that's about it. I gave my summary. What I disliked, sometimes he goes into flowery prose. I just think that he could have done it a little bit more simply, but that's really not a big deal at all. But yeah, that's the book I loved. It's called Over the Edge of the World by Laurence Bergreen, and the subtitle is Magellan's Terrific Circumnavigation of the Globe. Started off with 5 ships, 200 men, and they ended with 1 ship and 18 men. I mean, that is glory, that's destiny. That is great. If you understood that reference, you're pretty cool. That's about it for now, guys. I will do another episode tomorrow. I don't know what the book's going to be about yet, but probably something very similar to this. Good night.